So today we're gonna be doing the session 3, and we're gonna be discussing more on the foundation framework. So as I have said you before, we're gonna be discussing more on foundation framework. So the foundation framework is foundation framework has all the classes that you're gonna be using, or you can say variables that you're gonna be using in your iOS SDK, the framework, like NSstrings, NSarrays, NSmutable arrays, NSdictionaries, and all this stuff. So from today, I'm gonna start with one of the very essential topics of our iOS is known as properties. What exactly is a property and an instance variable? So let's just make a new project. Let's just name property. Just say hit next. Let's save it in desktop. That's the favorite place to save it. And so few things. So to make an instance variable, open the square brackets and you say NSstring star str. So now what happens? You have made a so you have successfully made a NSstring, a variable with NSstring, a variable pointer with NSstring. But this is a normal variable. So now we make it into a property. Let's give it some. So these things non-atomic. We're gonna discuss these in detail later, but for right now, just take my word, and I'm gonna be doing NSstring str2. So what is difference between these two? So this is a property. That means when you declare a variable as a property, you get default setter and getter methods with it. But this is an instance variable. This is just a variable, so this one will not have setter and getter methods with it, and there are a few more things that you can be used. So these properties can be also be accessed from other files, but you can't access these instance variable from other files. So when you are passing values between two classes or two files or two view controllers, so at that time you can't use instance variable. You need to use a property. Now how does it function? So now let's make this view did appear. Okay, and let's give memory to our class. Yeah, we're gonna discuss all of this part. For right now we are just discussing how to do this. Okay, so now we are given memory. So this is our instance variable, right? Yeah, and now you can say str equals to my name, this is Chirag. Okay, this is the, now with this I have given a name to it, but now use str2, which is a property. Now let's make it a system editor, m.m semi.h. Okay, so this is str2. Now to access str2, since this is a property, so we always have to call it in reference with the object of this class, and we can call the object of this class by using the keyword self. So we say self.str2 equals to, now we have to first allocate memory to it, NSstring alloc init str2, and now we get setter and getter methods with it. So you can say self space set capital S str2. So this is an instance variable. Again, this is an instance variable to which there are no default setter and getter methods with it, but with a property you get setter and getter methods with it. So you can also use the dot notation if you want to. This is self str2 equals to, so this method will call the setter method in the background for you, but you can also call the setter methods manually. So basically with properties you are getting additional features with it. Okay, this is the concept of setter and getter methods of a property. So a property is work the same way as a variable, instance variable. So this thing is known as an instance variable. This thing is known as a property. So a property works the same way as an instance variable, but the only difference is that property you get certain default methods and you can use them from different classes, and there are more features to it. You will learn that there is non-atomic, read only, so there are more features to it that we're going to be using later in our other projects. So it's advised to use more of these things, more of properties, whereas using instance variables. And if you like don't know, like over here I have not taught you how to use NSstrings, NS variables, so you just hit Alt or Option on your keyboard and just go to this. So you will see a question mark and then click on this class. So then this window will tell you all about the classes, and it will also tell you the frameworks or something important, or which is the reference class, and then you can open these references and read about it. uh, what is So we just saw what's a property, what's the instance variable. We just saw what's the instance variable, what's a property. What dot notation? So dot notation is basically to access the property of an object, and you have to use the space notation, the Objective-C syntax, to call the methods. This is the idea between the space and notation and the dot notation. So for the Objective-C, we are always advised to use space notation because this is the Objective-C and we should go with that. So dot notation is basically used to access the property. So the bomb is the instance or the object. And this is the property or the class of this bomb, and then you can access the property. That's how you use the dot notation. Nil. So now Objective-C, you can use null as well, but we usually go with nil. Nil is like default, like it is like pointing to nowhere. So it's kind of like 0, and they are mostly used for pointers because pointers cannot be set to 0, so they are set to nil. So they are pointers pointing to nowhere. It's like a 0 default for pointers. Boolean, we are all very familiar with Boolean. Boolean is for yes or no, true and false, 0 and 1, so it can only have two values. Boolean is going to be used a lot, so please be familiar with it. It is simply flag, not flag equal to yes, equal to no, not equal to no. Now instance versus class methods. What is an instance? Instance is an object of the class. So basically all the methods that you have to call, you call on the instance, because instance contains the data as well as all the methods to be called. So that's how you declare an instance method, starting with a dash, and a class method is always declared by using a plus. This is the main difference of declaration between an instance method and a class method. Okay, so class method, this is the syntax that you guys can have a look, try it out. Right now we're gonna be only making instant methods, and later we're gonna be also learning how to make class methods. These are the method examples. Instantiation. We use this word a lot in our Objective-C. So if you learn Objective-C, please learn to say this word, instantiation. What is instantiation? Instantiation is simply allocating and initiating memory, initiating it to 0. So keep in mind, in Objective-C, most of our objects, not most, all of the objects are accessed through pointers, because there are several reasons behind it. Because all the objects are allocated on the heap, and then in Objective-C we follow the concept of dynamic memory. Dynamic memory is getting allocated at the runtime. Whenever you are running your application, at that time the memory is allocated. So this is called as dynamic memory. So what happens? So all these objects are given memory at the runtime. This is one of the very main reasons that you access and that you make all the NS objects like NSstrings, NSarrays as pointers, because you want to give them memory on the runtime. So this code, alloc and init, is the one giving memory, and init is the one and ns is the one that is initializing this to 0. This is the concept of instantiation, allocating and initializing. Allocating heap allocation for a new object is done by NSObject. So you will learn that. So you have to code to write, but now you don't have to write the code anymore. It's already pre-written. Initializing is like giving it a default value. Like usually it's 0, or it's pointing to nowhere for all the variables. So you always say alloc and init. This is the instantiation of Objective C, giving memory to a pointer. There are more complicated init methods that you can write or that are already written, so you can look it up, have a look. It's not very important. Dynamic binding, as I told you, all objects are allocated onto the heap, so you always use a pointer because the memory is given at the runtime. And Objective C works on message passing. So whenever you call a method, the method is invoked how? A message is sent to that method. This is the idea of Objective C iOS SDK of of sending methods to the different classes. That's how they invoke methods. Introspection. What is introspection? So in Objective C, we have a new kind of class. We have a new data type known as ID type. So ID data type is a general data type which can accommodate any other variable. So it can take string, it can take an array, it can take a number, it can take a date, it can take a selector value, it can take anything. This is the concept of introspection. So what happens if you have a text field, or if you want to take an input from the user and you do not know what kind of input it could be, so you store it into a type of ID type, and then with this ID type you can make it, then you can move further with your operations. So now we're going to do an example on the ID type. Once again, ID is a generic data type in which you can store any of your variables, values, or suppose pointers or whatever you can think of. So ID is pretty much like you can take anything. So let's make an example. So the previous project that we did before, property, just open it up, and then we make a variable of type ID, and then we say var, just a name, var name. And in our Objective C we have this convention where the name of the instance has to be small, starts with a small letter, and the second word in the instance has to be a capital letter. So there are no underscores usually, it's just small and capital. And then since this is ID type, I can have it save anything, so I can make it into a string value, like string value it is. Then I can use nslog to print it out. Var name. So as you can see, I'm gonna print out my so see, this ID type could take in a string, and now let's make it for a number. So let's make it a number now. So we have made it into a type of NSNumber, and now see, so we will print out a number. So this shows that the ID type can be of any data type. Let's make it back to an NSstring value it is. And now, so let's try to call some methods on it. It's kind of class respond to selector. Let's have a if loop and then say name, and we are calling a method on this instance now. So we open the square brackets and say it's kind of class, and that's how you do. So now it's NSstring class. This is the syntax to make it of a type NSstring, and then you print out nslog. Yes, it is. And let's not print out our nslog. What what is the issue? Okay, we need this. That's it. Yeah, so our loop goes into this part. So let's have a breakpoint. Then we can see the values of our, and then you can say pu where and like that you can just keep on printing it out. And then so since it is a class of NSstring class, it will go inside it and it will print it out. Okay, so it works. And now if you make it of type a number, the number won't really go through. So now it's an NS number. It's not an NSstring class anymore. So the breakpoint that we have, so it will not go into this line, this NSlog line. So see, hence we have shown that, so it works for it. Okay. Now it also has this method called response to selector. So this response to selector is basically, so it will send you values. So it will call methods and not like breaking the and not causing errors. So see, like suppose this was my var name, right? I just say I will just comment it out because this part is done. I will say var name response to selector, and then I can say selector, and then I can just print out a class like count. Or since this is of type, let's make it of type NSstring. So class address. So I have made my ID type to be a variable and then give it a value to it, and now I will call a method on it. So again, let's make it into if loop. And now let's call a NSstring method. So we go into this class by hitting command, and then we call into the one of the methods of this. I'm looking for an easy method. So let's call uppercase string. Okay, so this is this method can be only be called on NSstring objects. Response selector. So we're gonna check that whether this ID type object is responding to this NSstring method or not. So since this is of type NSstring method, so it will respond to it. That means it will go inside this if loop. Yes, the ID variable is responding to NSstring class. Okay, so let's hit run. So see, here's the ID type. So this loop went through, and if I make it into an NSnumber now, so this loop will not go through anymore. So see, nothing happened because it is of type NSnumber and it would not respond to this method of a NSstring class, and so this loop will never be executed. This is a class type ID type. ID is a generic data type which can take any data type you can think of. Okay, so we did selector, and you can make a variable also, blah blah blah. Foundation framework. So we're gonna be using our main framework known as Foundation framework. Foundation framework contains the main class NSObject. This is the main pairing class in our Objective C. This is the main pairing class. all the classes in the foundation framework inherits from the NSObject. This has all the allocation methods, deallocation methods. It is pretty much the base class for every object in Objective-C. So they have more methods like shallow copy, deep copy, that we're gonna be doing later. Foundation. So we have this very important class that we're gonna use a lot, NSstring. NSstring is like a kind of a string, but in our Objective-C we have classes of all the variables. So NSstring is a class and it can have methods. It can be called methods to this class. So as we did an example before, this is my NSstring. This was my ID type. So I'm gonna remove this whole code because we don't require it anymore. Okay. And then let's make it of type NSstring star str. And I have like told you before that why do we make it of pointer types. You allocate memory to it and then you initialize it. Okay, so now we have this variable str. Now I can go inside this class. So you hit command and then you click on this class, so then you can see the properties of it. You have all these methods, so you can call these classes as so we can let's make two variables, copy and paste it. So we made two variables and then we called, and then let's call the method. So basically we are trying to percentage d because so we are trying to call a method on this. So we say str1 1. Let's see this method. The method name is what? Is equal to string. Is equal it's giving me a hard time. Is equal to string. So str is equal to str var1 is equal to str, and so we are calling this method on this instance of this class NSstring, and then when we hit run, since this is true right now because we just initialize it, so it's gonna be 1. Well, if you don't take my word, we can give it values. Str var1 equals to ccc. So it has to be capital. And then you give this value str var2 ccc. So see, so these both are equal, so we got a return back value true, which is 1. And suppose if I make it different, ccct, so now I should get a return back value of 0, which is false. So see, that's how you call methods, and then you can call more methods on it, like if you want to call methods. So let's change this method to what? Yeah, length. So you have a length now, and you have to also change this. This is a NS object in the foundation framework, so you have to say percentage ampersand. Oh, this is a long def, so they want to change it to long def. Then you hit run. So see, it gives you back the length of the string. Now let's move on. So this is basically your NSstring class, and in this one you have to make it of a type pointer variable, and then you alloc and initialize it, and then you can give it a value, and then you can call all the methods on this instance. To see the methods of this class, you just hit command, then you go on to this class. So then you can see all the methods: length, character at index, initialize, init with coder. If you want to find substrings inside the class with the index, it will give you back the index. So there are literally so many methods of this class. You can say compare options, mask, case insensitive compare, localize compare, is equal to string, has prefix, has suffix, contains string, localize, case insensitive contains string, localize standard contains string, localize standard range of characters from set, string by appending string, string by appending format. So basically, like, you can add a string with format. You can like call all these values if you want to get a integer value of it or anything. You can also get the uppercase strings of these ones. Encoding. So there are so many methods to it. So let's learn about NSnumber. NSnumber is the one which has, which is basically like a wrapper around the integer, float, bool, etc. You can have the NSnumber, and then you can instantiate it by saying NSnumber, and then you can give it a value with int, with float, or anything. And then you can also get like a return value or float value. Then you have NS value, so we're gonna be learning it later. uh, then we have NSData. So this is for the binary data, bags of bits. It is used to save, restore, transfer data through iOS SDK. NSDate basically, so this is to like store date, and it has more properties. So let's see an example. If we make like a NSDate start date, then you say NSDate. So now this will instantiate it, and by instantiation I mean it is calling alloc and init on this NSDate. So when you use NSlog, so now this will print out uh, the current date for today, because this is the default initialization. See, this is the current date for today, 2016 6th February, and this is the time that's stored in the iOS object, this our simulator. I don't want to, if you use this, then you also say init. This should also work the same way probably. Let's see. Yeah, this will also work in the same way. Alloc and init, and then you can also say NSdate date. Okay. I wanna come to our favorite. Yeah, this is the one that NSarrays. So in our objective C, we have this NSarrays. What is the NSarray? NSarray is basically like an array. What is an array? Array is just a collection of objects. So like in our other languages, we have the strings, we have the numbers. So we have a generic type of NSarrays because the input type is ID type. So you can have whatever object you want to. So you can have just one string and one number, two strings, two numbers, an NSarray of NSarrays. Anything is possible. And then since this is a class, so it has methods on it. So let's do some example. Let's remove the previous ones, or we can use it before. Okay, let's use it. NSarray star array. Let's instantiate it. Alloc init with objects. Let's init with objects. So then you can give. So let's give it object. So let's give it NSstring as string1, string2, string 3. Okay, so now we are given it as objects. Now and now hit run. So now we should see the 3 strings getting printed out: string 1, string 2, string 3. Okay, and now if we want to call some methods on it, since this is a class, we have methods like count, so this should give the count of the array. See, now this is giving me the count. I know what I did wrong. Okay, so let's go inside this class and see more methods like count, object at index. If you want to see the index of an object, init with objects, we use these methods. Array by adding object. So basically you have an array. Basically you make a new array, and then you want to add an objects and an array. You want to add an array to an array. You want to describe from local. So there are so many types of it. So many methods that you can use. You're gonna be using, so this thing will come by use. The more you use it, the more you will understand. Okay, this is a bad example because this returns a integer type, so you always have to use %d because it is returning an integer. Okay, and now in this one you can also give like different objects, like I want to give str var1, which we declared before, and then I want to give NSdate. No, date. So now we have given a string, and now we have given an NSdate. Okay, so see, it works. You have the first string first, and then you have the date. So basically an NSarray is a collection of ID type objects. Now this ID type objects can be ID type is a generic type, so which can have strings, numbers, objects, NSarrays, whatever you can think of. And then it has so many methods: object and index, last object, sorted array, contains object. There are so many of them. But one issue in our NSarray is that you can't have the you can't change the name. So once in this one, see, you say init with object, right? So if you cannot call the method on array add object, so there is no add object. So once you have made an array, that means it is fixed now. They will not keep on increasing the array now. You can't change the size of the array, or you can't remove the objects from the array. So they came up with this new idea of NS mutable array. So in this one you can change the index now. So let's do this. NSarray mutable array alec. Then we can say init with array or init. Then I can say init with array. Then I will give it array. Okay, so I made a mutable array. Let's give it a type mutable array. Okay. Now we basically have these three things. So now we have made a mutable array, right? And now, but in the mutable array you can add objects. So you say mutable array add objects. So then you can add str2. So I'm basically adding object to it now. So see, I had 1, 2, and then I added object to it. And then since I've added it, now I can also remove it. Then you can say remove object, or then you can give the index remove object add index. There are so many methods to remove it. Okay, and it has methods of NSarray, and then top of that it has more methods. Now let's come to a very interesting one as the NSset. So what is NSset? NSset is basically like similar to array, but it's an unordered set. So what happens? So in this one you can simply use you can simply be it's an array but there is no index in it. So in this one you cannot like call objects with the index, like object at index, object at this index. So you also, so it's basically like, and the second thing is with NSset there cannot be any duplicacy. NSset is actually like if you have an array which has multiple duplicacies, so you just put it into a NSset, and then that NSset will give you an will give you a will give you a collection where there is no duplicacy. So they came up with this new idea of NSordered set which has an index too. Enumeration. So now we see the enumeration. Enumeration is basically going through all the components of a collection. This is the concept of array. Like so, so in this mutable array we have what else? We have two strings and one date, right? And now I just want to like print out the strings in this one. How will I do it? So it is for no wait, it's not for, it's NSstring str strr in. So you say whatever like type you want in mutable array. So basically like you will just print out so now I'm saying just print out the str. Now I'm saying, so just basically print out all the strings inside this array now. Okay, it doesn't print out. Okay, str. Enumeration is basically going through all the objects in a collection. So this collection can be of mutable array, NSset, NSdictionary, any of them. And then you can just simply print it out, or you can make it of ID type. ID. I can then say ID val, and then you can print it out, or then you can check what is wrong. Okay, you never use a pointer, and then you can say if id var is member of class, no, is kind of class, then you can say like NSstring, and you can say NSlog, then you can say just id var. So like this I will just print out my strings and nothing else. So see, now I just printed out my strings. Or if you want to just look for NSDate, NSDate class. So we just printed out the date now. So we're basically like doing enumeration. So we're going through all the objects and then we're checking for each object for which class they belong to. This is the concept of enumeration, going through all the objects in a collection. Okay, so I forgot one of the very important topics, this a dictionary. What's a dictionary? Dictionary is simply like a hash map. It has a key and it has a value. It has a key and then it has a value. So like let's make it of NS dictionary. So let's comment it out, the whole thing. We can just hit command and then a forward slash. So it just like comments out the whole everything. And then you say NS dictionary start dict. Then you say NS dictionary alec init with detection. So you say objects and keys, and then you will say uh, object one key one. So we made it of NSdictionary, which has a key and has an object. So it has with objects and keys. So first is the object, second is the key. So the key is equal to objects. This is my keyword. Then I will give it a second object as so, comma. So now I have two keys with two objects. Basically, so it's like a serialization where you give keys and then you give values. You give keys and then you give values. So there are a lot of properties that you can use. So we used objects and keys. You can also use objects like an NSarray of objects and NSarray of keys. You can make it with the new numbers. Then they have properties of count, object for key, so which you can just give the object and it will give you back the key. And then you can print out all keys or all values. Keys are sent as hash. If you know hash maps, you're gonna know what is a hash key. It is used for unique identification, so the key has to be unique. And then you have another data type as NS mutable dictionary, because these ones are not mutable, so they came to the mutable version of dictionary, where you can add object, remove object, add entries, and you can do all the operations. So guys, this is it for today. So we learned about NSobjects, NSset, NSarrays, NSstring, NSnumber NSdictionaries, enumeration, introspection, ID type, NSset. So if you like my video, just keep on coming back, and please subscribe to the button. So hit like subscribe so that I can make more and more videos. Thank you. See you next time.